In a world where some of the powerful take advantage of those who don't have much power or little or any power, what are we God's people supposed to do? In a world where there's some places of abundance that people hardly know what to do with it all, and other people are hungry, how are we God's people supposed to live? In a world where recently a man filled with hate and apparently conspiracy theories walks into a synagogue and shoots it up and 11 die, how are we God's people supposed to respond? Our hearts ache, surely. But the thing I would note is these things aren't new for our time frame, our time period at all. In fact, the prophet Micah, who we heard from today, wrote at a time 2,700 years ago where things were not well either. He lived in a time where the Assyrian Empire was going to make war, made war, and then the aftermath of that war in Israel. So that a lot of the good structures and the people they needed to keep order in their society were lost and destroyed. And they wondered from God, how do we please you? How do we get this thing turned around? How do we get this turned around? So some of the things that were happening, and Micah lists these, is that powerful people were coming in and taking the land and houses of other people. The prophet Isaiah wrote at a very similar time, and he lifted up the orphans and the widows. In a male-dominated society like it was, if the man wasn't there, the widows and the orphans were at great risk to be abused or neglected and such things. So they named very specific things in that day. And here's what the prophet said to the people. He has told you, O mortals, what is good and what the Lord requires from you. Do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. So he's saying, you guys, you kind of already know. These words are, I think, in many ways, a summary of all that law in the Old Testament. There's hundreds of laws in the Old Testament beyond the Ten Commandments. There's all these laws, and people kind of felt overwhelmed, I think, sometimes by them. So he just reduces it down, and I think he reduces it down in a way that resonates with our conscience. Well, we already know. If you just get these things right, do justice, love mercy, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. You got it. You have it already. Simple little things. I think we all want those things for ourselves. We certainly want justice for ourselves. If something goes wrong, right, we're on the phone, someone stole my car, call the police, get people involved, get my car back, get the person punished, whatever needs to happen there. We want it leveled out. Somebody do something about justice for ourselves. Because injustice burns in there, doesn't it? You always feel the loss and it's hard to get rid of that sense of injustice when it burns you. It's tough. Love kindness. Who doesn't want kindness? I like people kind to me and I'm kind to them, and it goes back and forth, and it's just a better place when we're kind with each other. We want it for ourselves. And the same with walking humbly with our God. It's just something we can tell in its nature. It's good. It's a little tougher to hope for these things for others, though, outside our own little circles. Strangers, people who live in different countries, on the other side of the world even. It's a little tougher to say, well, it really extends to them, that God wants to be that way, but I think God wants us to be that way for everyone. And in our living out that, I think we kind of start fulfilling what Jesus told, being a light on the hill. We're that light, doing justice and loving kindness and walking humbly with God. We become a bit of a light on the hill. And our good works so shine before others, as we say in our baptismal vows, here's where it's from, that they see our good works and they give glory to our Father in heaven. Powerful stuff. Well, let me tell you about a Lutheran saint, I think, on this All Saints' Day, fulfilled this pretty well. One that, unless you were at our thing last week, probably never heard of, Gudina Tumsa. There's not your average name, and of course he's not from around here. He's from Ethiopia. The biggest Lutheran church in the world is in Ethiopia. They don't have Lutheran in its name. It's the Church of Makani Jesus. Going on 9 million people in that church. Big place, big church. Thriving. Lutheranism is thriving in Africa. It's amazing how well it's doing over there. Anyway, Gudima lived, he's older than us. He went the same seminary Pastor Daniel and I went to. But he went there in the 60s during the civil rights time period. And in that civil rights time period, the ideas of Martin Luther King really informed his thinking. And when he went back to Ethiopia, he started teaching, and one of his basic principles it was on love and justice. He said they need each other. And he went around teaching them how justice, without love, became kind of harsh and even political. Became a tool in the politics often. And he said love without justice becomes kind of sentiment in your head. It doesn't get on the ground, it doesn't have feet on the ground, and people tend to withdraw if it's just about love without a sense of justice. And that was one of his core teachings he brought for his people, that those two things need to go together. Well, it wasn't very long until he was no longer the teacher of that church, but he was the head of that church. He became the top leader of that church. And after that had happened, the country went through a coup where the Marxist socialists took over the country. And they are atheists by their nature. He tried to get along with them, but they had no interest in getting along with the church or Mr. Tumsa. They did not want him, and they arrest him. A whole lot of international pressure comes in for them to release pastor and leader Mr. Tumsa, and they finally relent and they release him. And everybody tells him when he's released, you need to leave. They're after you. These people don't want you. You need to run away. And he told them this right out of 2 Corinthians. He said, Christ died for us that we might not live for ourselves, but that we might live for the one who died and was raised on our behalf. And he said, I will not leave. Well, it wasn't much longer that they actually did finish the job, and they assassinated him. And many people see him, and one of the ways the West has talked about him is kind of the Dietrich Bonhoeffer of Africa. An exceptional person who lived the life and put his life on the line and actually lost his life. A Lutheran saint that you probably have never heard of, but what a great person. Well, as I think of this day, of this Saints' Day, we, in terms of our embodying, doing justice, loving kindness, and walking humbly with our God, I think of many other people. And the way I understand All Saints' Day is really, the core of that is a reminder that my life is a gift from God. A gift from God that comes through other people. It comes through, for me, I think of my parents. I mentioned that in my children's story. It came through my parents. Not only did they give me my biology, my genes, and all that I am here and standing in front of you, but they shaped me because they loved me, and they taught me good values, and they gave me a sense of who God was as they could. They weren't perfect. No one's perfect. But they really shaped me. They were the key. And beyond that, of course, we all can enlarge that circle beyond parents to others. Other family, spouses, and grandparents, uncles, or aunts, or what have you there that have gone before us, that through whom God has worked to shape who we are today. To know we are loved. To know that there's these values that we follow as God's people. That God has given these people, and we can make the circle larger than family, of course. We have mentors and teachers and other great leaders, someone like Mr. Tumsa, Pastor Tumsa, out there that we look up to that have really impacted our lives here today. And so we'll invite you up very shortly to light some candles in their honor. And if you're like me, there's always some tears pretty fast there when you think of them and you remember them. There's some tears pretty fast. But with that tears, I hope you can also find your way to a little bit of gratitude. That through them, we have this life here together. From them. I hope you find some gratitude. And that as you light that candle, you realize that, as I was telling the children, that our light still shines before God. We're not some city under a bushel, a light under a bushel, but our lights shine, their light shines still for us. They began in God and they end in God, as we do too. And it's to this hope that we commend ourselves and light candles on this All Saints' Day. So let's join in the hymn. I believe it's 720. You are called.